"You don't belong here," the woman behind the polished marble counter said without the slightest hesitation, and the words landed harder than any raised voice ever could because everyone in the luxury lobby heard them at the exact same moment. Conversations faded, coffee cups paused halfway to waiting hands, and curious eyes drifted toward the man standing quietly with nothing more than a small leather travel bag and a calm expression that refused to crack under judgment. He didn't argue. He didn't flinch. He simply looked at her as though he had heard those exact words years before in different cities, different buildings, spoken by different people wearing different uniforms, yet carrying the very same assumptions. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here." Now, back to Marcus Ellison. At 47 years old, Marcus looked nothing like the stereotype the staff expected from someone with extraordinary wealth. He wore dark jeans, clean white sneakers, a charcoal t-shirt beneath a lightweight jacket, and a simple watch that attracted no attention. There was no designer luggage, no security detail, no expensive jewelry announcing status before character. That was intentional. He had learned long ago that appearances often revealed more about the observer than the person being observed. The hotel around him gleamed beneath warm chandeliers, polished brass reflecting soft afternoon light across spotless marble floors. Guests checked in quietly while a pianist played gentle jazz from the corner lounge, creating the illusion that everything inside this building represented elegance, hospitality, and respect. Illusions, Marcus often reminded himself, were the easiest things to sell and the hardest things to maintain. The front desk supervisor folded her arms and glanced toward another employee as though silently asking for validation. She received it immediately. A younger clerk leaned closer, lowered his voice just enough to sound discreet, and said, "Sir, premium guests usually use the executive entrance." Marcus answered with complete composure. "I'm exactly where I need to be." His calmness somehow irritated them more than anger ever could have. Another employee picked up the phone beneath the counter, pretending to verify a reservation while repeatedly looking at Marcus instead of the computer screen. Nearby guests exchanged uncertain glances. An elderly couple frowned. A business traveler quietly removed one earbud, sensing that something uncomfortable was unfolding. A young concierge standing several feet away studied the reservation monitor, her expression changing almost instantly before she looked back at Marcus with unmistakable recognition, yet she hesitated, unsure whether speaking up would cost her job. Marcus remained perfectly still. Years earlier, when he was 24, he had walked into another upscale property after closing the biggest business deal of his young career. The manager had smiled politely until seeing the name on the reservation matched the man standing in front of him. The smile disappeared. Suddenly identification wasn't enough. Suddenly policies became flexible. Suddenly he was asked questions no other guest had been asked. That afternoon never left him. It became fuel instead of bitterness. Every company he built afterward carried one simple principle: dignity should never depend on appearance. Standing once again beneath another elegant chandelier, Marcus recognized the familiar silence before injustice revealed itself completely. He wasn't there to prove who he was. He was there to discover who everyone else chose to become when they believed no one important was watching. The supervisor forced a professional smile that never reached her eyes before sliding the registration tablet back across the counter without allowing Marcus to touch it. "We are unable to locate your reservation," she said carefully, emphasizing each word as though repeating them would somehow make them true. Marcus glanced briefly toward the screen. He had seen enough to notice that she had not searched for his confirmation number at all. Instead, she had typed only his last name once, closed the window almost immediately, and decided the conversation was finished. "Would you like to try the reservation number?" Marcus asked in the same calm tone that had never changed since walking through the front entrance. The supervisor tilted her head slightly. "That will not be necessary, sir." Behind her, the younger clerk folded his arms with quiet satisfaction while whispering something that made another employee smirk. None of them realized the concierge standing several feet away had quietly opened the executive reservation database on her own terminal. Her eyes widened for just a second before she quickly looked back down, afraid someone might notice her reaction. Marcus noticed anyway. He noticed everything. Years of leading negotiations worth billions of dollars had taught him that silence often revealed more than conversation ever could. A middle-aged businessman waiting nearby finally spoke. "If he has a confirmation number, why not just check it?" The supervisor answered without looking at him. "We follow procedures for everyone's protection." The explanation sounded polished, yet the room somehow grew heavier instead of lighter. An older woman carrying a rolling suitcase frowned. "That seems like a simple request to verify." No one behind the counter responded. Instead, another employee quietly picked up a telephone receiver and spoke softly enough that the words disappeared beneath the piano music drifting through the lobby. Marcus recognized the pattern immediately. Delay first. Isolation second. Authority third. It was almost identical to experiences he had faced decades earlier, except now the language had become more polished while the assumptions underneath remained painfully familiar. He slowly removed his phone from his jacket pocket and unlocked the screen without urgency. There was no dramatic gesture, no visible frustration, only deliberate patience. His thumb paused above a familiar contact before he decided not to press it. Not yet. He wanted to give people every reasonable opportunity to choose professionalism over prejudice. The concierge gathered enough courage to step closer. "Excuse me," she began carefully. "I think I may have found." The supervisor immediately interrupted without turning around. "Emily, please return to your station." Emily hesitated. She looked at Marcus, then back at the reservation screen glowing in front of her. The profile she had opened displayed executive-level authorization unlike anything she had ever seen during her 3 years at the property. Every instruction attached to the reservation required immediate accommodation, direct management attention, and unrestricted access. None of it matched the treatment unfolding only a few yards away. Marcus offered her a reassuring nod, silently telling her not to risk her position unnecessarily. She understood. Across the lobby, another guest quietly raised a phone, not to embarrass anyone, but simply because something felt undeniably wrong. The atmosphere no longer resembled a routine check-in. It felt like a test of character unfolding in real time, one polite sentence at a time. Marcus slipped the phone back into his pocket and looked directly at the supervisor. "I am still willing to let this end with dignity," he said softly. "The next decision belongs entirely to you." The supervisor's expression hardened the moment Marcus finished speaking, as though kindness itself had become an inconvenience. "I think it would be best if you left the property," she replied, her voice louder than before, making certain nearby guests could hear every word. "We have other guests waiting, and we cannot continue this conversation." Marcus remained exactly where he was. He neither stepped forward nor backward. His composure unsettled the employees more than any argument could have. The younger clerk reached beneath the counter and pressed a small button. Within seconds, a hotel security supervisor in a navy suit emerged from a hallway leading to the administrative offices. His pace was measured, but his eyes immediately settled on Marcus instead of asking anyone what had actually happened. "Is there a problem here?" he asked. Before Marcus could answer, the front desk supervisor spoke first. "This gentleman refuses to leave after we explained that we cannot verify his reservation." The statement sounded complete, yet it left out every meaningful detail. Emily felt her heartbeat quicken. She looked again at the executive reservation still displayed on her monitor. The confirmation number matched perfectly. The payment authorization had already cleared. Every field was complete. The system even displayed a priority message instructing staff to notify executive leadership immediately upon the guest's arrival. She knew the reservation was real. She also knew speaking again might cost her career. Across the lobby, the businessman who had questioned this situation earlier stepped closer. "Did anyone actually enter the confirmation number?" he asked. The security supervisor glanced toward the front desk. No one answered. The silence lasted only a moment, yet it exposed more than any explanation could have. Another guest quietly added, "If everything is legitimate, checking the reservation would solve this in less than a minute." Instead of accepting the suggestion, the younger clerk folded his arms again. "Sir, hotel procedures are internal matters." Marcus listened without interrupting. Every sentence reinforced what he had already suspected before entering the building. Procedures were no longer being used to serve guests. They were being used to justify assumptions. Emily finally inhaled deeply and spoke despite the obvious risk. "Excuse me," she said carefully. "The reservation is active." Every head turned toward her. The front desk supervisor's face tightened instantly. "Emily," she said firmly, "return to your station." Emily swallowed but did not move. "The confirmation is valid. Executive level. Everything has already been approved." A ripple of whispers spread through the lobby. The older woman with the rolling suitcase looked from Emily to Marcus before quietly saying, "Then why is he being treated this way?" No one behind the counter answered. The security supervisor shifted uncomfortably. His confidence seemed to weaken for the first time. Marcus met Emily's eyes with quiet gratitude. He offered only a slight nod, enough to acknowledge the courage it had taken for her to speak. Then he slowly removed his phone once more. This time his thumb pressed the familiar contact. The call connected almost immediately. "Good afternoon, Mr. Ellison," a calm professional voice answered. Marcus spoke softly enough that only those nearest the desk could hear. "Please begin Protocol 1. I believe the observation period is over." The voice on the other end responded without hesitation. "Understood. We are ready whenever you are." Marcus ended the call, slipped the phone back into his pocket, and looked across the suddenly silent lobby. "I hoped respect would arrive before accountability," he said quietly. "Now we are about to discover which one reaches this lobby first." No one in the lobby knew what Protocol 1 meant, but everyone noticed the subtle change that followed. Marcus did not smile. He did not celebrate. He simply waited with the same quiet confidence that had carried him through decades of impossible negotiations. The security supervisor lowered his radio slightly, uncertainty replacing the certainty he had displayed only moments earlier. Emily remained beside her terminal, her hands resting lightly on the keyboard. She knew she had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed, yet for the first time since joining the hotel she felt she had actually honored the meaning of hospitality. The front desk supervisor looked directly at her. "You have already said enough." Emily answered politely but firmly. "I only stated what the reservation system shows." The words were calm, but they changed the atmosphere again. Several guests exchanged approving glances. The businessman nodded quietly. The older woman folded her arms and looked toward the front desk with visible disappointment rather than anger. A younger couple waiting near the elevators whispered that none of this made sense if the reservation had already been verified. The polished lobby no longer felt like a luxury destination. It felt like a room waiting for the truth to arrive. Marcus watched every reaction without judgment. He had learned long ago that pressure did not create character. It revealed it. Every person standing in that lobby was making a choice, whether through action, silence, honesty, or convenience. A notification suddenly appeared on Emily's monitor. She blinked once, then looked at it again to make certain she had not imagined what she was seeing. A secure executive channel had opened automatically. Across the top of the screen appeared a simple message. "Executive operations connected. Stand by." Emily had never seen that screen before. Her eyes widened, but she said nothing. The front desk supervisor noticed her expression and immediately stepped closer. "What is on your screen?" Emily hesitated only briefly. "An executive connection." The supervisor frowned. "Close it." Emily slowly shook her head. "I cannot. It is locked by corporate authorization." Those words spread through the lobby almost as quickly as a whisper could travel. The younger clerk shifted uneasily and looked toward the security supervisor as though expecting instructions. Instead, the security supervisor remained silent. His confidence had almost completely disappeared. Marcus glanced toward the revolving doors as sunlight spilled across the marble floor. Somewhere beyond those doors, events had already begun moving in ways no one inside the building could yet see. His phone vibrated once. He looked at the screen for only a second before placing it back into his pocket. There was no need to read the message twice. Everything was proceeding exactly as expected. The businessman finally addressed Marcus directly. "Sir, I do not know who you are, but I owe you an apology for what you have been put through." Marcus offered a grateful nod. "Thank you," he replied. "Respect from one person is always worth more than status from 100 strangers." Emily looked up from her monitor once again. A second message had appeared beneath the first. Executive leadership arrival estimated 2 minutes. She quietly read the words to herself, then slowly lifted her eyes toward Marcus. In that instant she realized this was never about a reservation. It was about whether people would choose fairness before they knew who deserved their respect. Outside the glass entrance, 2 black executive vehicles turned into the circular driveway at almost the exact same moment, and every employee standing behind the front desk instinctively looked toward the doors as the entire lobby fell into complete silence. The revolving doors opened slowly, and the quiet sound of polished shoes crossing marble drew every eye in the lobby without a single command being spoken. 3 men and 1 woman wearing tailored business attire entered together with measured confidence, each carrying nothing except a tablet and an unmistakable sense of purpose. They did not rush. They did not scan the room in confusion. Instead, they walked with the precision of people who already knew exactly why they had been called. The front desk supervisor immediately straightened her posture, assuming they were important guests. She forced another practiced smile and stepped away from the counter. "Welcome to the hotel," she said warmly. "How may we assist you today?" The woman leading the group barely slowed her pace. "We are here in response to an executive operations request." The words landed like a sudden change in weather. The supervisor's smile weakened. "May I ask who requested it?" The woman glanced toward Marcus. He did. Every conversation in the lobby disappeared. The younger clerk looked from Marcus to the arriving executives and then back again, searching for an explanation that refused to appear. Emily quietly lowered her eyes. She already knew what the answer would be, yet hearing it spoken aloud somehow made the moment feel even heavier. The security supervisor took one careful step backward, no longer certain where he belonged in the unfolding situation. Marcus remained exactly where he had stood since entering the building. His breathing was steady. His expression remained composed. The arriving executive stopped several feet in front of him. The woman offered a respectful nod. "Good afternoon, Mr. Ellison. Executive operations is fully active. Every communication from this lobby has been preserved, including reservation records, employee logins, internal messages, and security timestamps." Marcus acknowledged her with a slight nod of his own. "Thank you, Claire." Hearing his name spoken with unmistakable professional respect caused several guests to exchange astonished glances. The businessman who had defended him looked quietly vindicated. The older woman slowly shook her head, disappointed not by Marcus's identity but by how differently he had been treated before anyone recognized it. Claire continued speaking with calm precision. "We also confirmed that the reservation was validated yesterday at 3:14 in the afternoon, payment was authorized immediately afterward, and executive arrival instructions were distributed to management this morning at 7:28. Emily closed her eyes briefly. She remembered seeing that exact notification earlier in the day. It had been ignored. The front desk supervisor attempted to recover. There must have been a misunderstanding. Marcus looked at her without anger. Misunderstandings are corrected by questions. Assumptions are protected by excuses. His voice never rose above ordinary conversation, yet every word carried across the silent lobby. For a brief moment, another memory surfaced in his mind. He remembered being 29 years old, standing inside another luxury property after completing the acquisition that transformed his career. The clerk had smiled at the white executive standing behind him, then asked Marcus whether he was delivering packages. That memory had never become a source of resentment. It became a promise. If he ever built organizations of his own, every guest would be welcomed before they were evaluated. Standing beneath the chandeliers years later, he realized promises were only meaningful when tested under pressure. Today was not simply revealing one employee's judgment. It was revealing the culture that had quietly allowed that judgment to survive until someone finally refused to accept it. Claire turned her tablet toward Marcus without saying another word. He reviewed the screen for only a few seconds before handing it back. There was no surprise on his face because every detail matched what he had expected. The records confirmed the reservation had been acknowledged, the executive arrival instructions had been delivered, and multiple employee accounts had opened his profile long before he entered the lobby. Nothing about the situation had been accidental. The front desk supervisor drew a slow breath. "Mr. Ellison, perhaps we should continue this conversation privately." Marcus looked around the lobby before answering. "The decisions were made publicly. The explanation can remain public." No one argued with him. Even the piano player had quietly stopped performing, leaving the room wrapped in a silence that seemed almost impossible inside such a busy hotel. Claire tapped her screen once more. "Protocol 1 has completed its review. We are authorized to proceed with Protocol 2 upon your instruction." Marcus nodded. "Proceed." Another notification appeared across the executive tablets carried by the arriving team. At nearly the same moment, Emily's terminal refreshed automatically. A new window opened displaying internal guest service reports from the previous 18 months. Emily read only a few lines before her expression changed again. Several complaints described guests feeling dismissed before anyone verified their reservations. Others mentioned assumptions based on appearance rather than confirmed information. Different names. Different dates. The same pattern. Claire spoke with calm professionalism. "The audit has identified repeated service concerns connected to this location. Today's incident did not create the investigation. It completed it." The words settled heavily across the lobby. The younger clerk lowered his eyes toward the polished floor. The security supervisor removed his identification badge from his jacket for a moment, staring at it as though reconsidering everything his role was supposed to represent. Marcus slowly walked a few steps across the marble floor, not away from the desk but toward the guests who had quietly witnessed everything. "Hospitality begins long before room keys are issued," he said. "It begins with the decision to believe someone deserves respect before they prove they deserve privilege." The businessman nodded immediately. The older woman smiled gently. A young couple standing near the elevators exchanged thoughtful glances, realizing they had watched something much larger than a disagreement at a front desk. Claire received another message through her earpiece. She listened silently before addressing Marcus once more. "Executive leadership has joined the live review. They have requested confirmation before activating personnel actions." Marcus remained thoughtful for a brief moment. His eyes moved toward Emily, who had chosen honesty despite considerable personal risk. Then they moved toward the employees whose choices had brought the lobby to this moment. His voice stayed even, free from anger or triumph. "Leadership is not measured by how we treat important people," he said quietly. "It is measured by how we treat people before we know they are important." Claire acknowledged the statement with a respectful nod and entered a final authorization into her tablet. Across multiple hotel computer terminals, access indicators began refreshing simultaneously. No announcements were made. No alarms sounded. Yet everyone behind the front desk understood that the system itself had begun responding, and for the first time since Marcus had entered the building, the balance of authority had shifted completely away from assumptions and back toward accountability. The lobby remained so quiet that the faint hum of the air conditioning became impossible to ignore. Every employee behind the front desk watched their computer screens refresh almost simultaneously, each notification replacing certainty with uncertainty. Claire reviewed the latest report before lifting her eyes toward Marcus. "The Executive Review Board has completed its preliminary assessment," she said calmly. "The findings confirm that today's incident was not caused by a system failure. The reservation was valid from the beginning, and established guest service procedures were not followed." No one interrupted her. The supervisor who had confidently dismissed Marcus only minutes earlier seemed unable to find the words that had come so easily before. Marcus finally stepped closer to the counter, not to confront anyone but to remove the distance that assumptions had created. His expression remained composed. "You told me I did not belong before asking a single meaningful question," he said. "You decided who I was before you decided to learn my name. That is the real failure we are standing in today." His voice never carried anger. It carried disappointment, and somehow that felt heavier. Claire nodded once before making a final selection on her tablet. "For the record," she said, "please state your position." Marcus looked briefly around the room, making eye contact with the guests who had witnessed every moment of the exchange. Then he answered. "My name is Marcus Ellison. I serve as Chief Executive Officer of Ellison Hospitality Group, the company that owns this property." The words settled over the lobby like complete silence. The businessman who had spoken up earlier slowly exhaled. The older woman placed a hand over her heart. Emily closed her eyes for a brief second, not because she was surprised anymore, but because the truth she had protected was finally visible to everyone else. Marcus continued without changing his tone. "But that is not the important part. If I had been an ordinary traveler, every guest in this building would still deserve exactly the same respect. My title does not make today's treatment unacceptable. Your choices made it unacceptable." Claire displayed another document on her screen. "Executive leadership has authorized immediate corrective action and a comprehensive review of guest service practices at this location." Marcus nodded. "Good. Accountability should improve people, not simply embarrass them." He turned toward Emily. "Thank you for choosing honesty when it carried personal risk. Organizations become stronger because of people willing to protect integrity instead of convenience." Emily's eyes filled with emotion, but she simply answered, "I only followed the truth." Marcus smiled gently. "That is often the hardest thing to follow." Around the lobby, several guests quietly applauded. It was not loud. It was respectful. It was the sound of people recognizing that dignity had finally been restored. The marble floors, polished glass, and elegant chandeliers suddenly felt less important than the simple lesson everyone present would remember long after they checked out. Respect was never supposed to be reserved for those whose status was already known. It was supposed to be offered first, because once respect depends on appearances, hospitality has already failed. The applause faded naturally, leaving behind something far more meaningful than noise. It left reflection. Claire received one final confirmation on her tablet before addressing the room with the same measured professionalism she had shown since arriving. "Executive leadership has completed its review. Effective immediately, the employees directly responsible for today's handling of this guest interaction are being removed from active duty pending a formal human resources process and a comprehensive policy review." She spoke without emotion because the decision was not personal. It was procedural. The front desk supervisor lowered her identification badge onto the polished counter without being asked. The younger clerk stared quietly at the floor, finally recognizing that confidence built on assumptions rarely survives contact with facts. The security supervisor took a slow breath before offering Marcus a sincere apology. "I accepted a version of events before asking my own questions," he admitted. "I should have done better." Marcus nodded respectfully. Owning a mistake is the first step toward preventing another one. There was no celebration in his voice. Accountability had never been about humiliation. It had always been about improvement. Claire continued entering notes into the executive report while another member of her team coordinated temporary staffing so arriving guests would continue receiving uninterrupted service. The transition happened with remarkable efficiency, reminding everyone watching that strong organizations planned not only for success but also for moments requiring difficult decisions. Marcus turned toward Emily, who still stood quietly beside her terminal, uncertain whether she should remain where she was. Claire smiled slightly. Emily, executive leadership has reviewed your actions as well. Your decision to verify the reservation, document the facts accurately, and speak honestly under pressure has been formally recognized. Emily blinked in surprise. I only followed what the system showed. Marcus answered before anyone else could. No. You followed your principles even when doing so carried personal risk. Systems provide information. Character determines whether someone is willing to speak the truth. Several guests smiled in agreement. The businessman extended his hand toward Marcus. Thank you for reminding all of us that leadership can be quiet. Marcus accepted the handshake warmly. Leadership should create trust long before it creates authority. The older woman who had defended fairness earlier looked around the lobby and said softly, I hope every hotel learns from today. Claire closed her tablet. That is exactly the intention. She explained that a company-wide review of guest service training would begin immediately, emphasizing respectful verification procedures, consistent standards, and the responsibility to examine facts before forming conclusions. Marcus listened with quiet approval. This outcome mattered more to him than any dramatic display of power ever could. Policies could be rewritten. Training could be improved. Cultures could change if enough people chose integrity over convenience. Sunlight continued pouring through the tall glass entrance as new guests arrived, unaware that the lobby they had just entered had already become a better place than it had been an hour earlier. The marble floors had not changed. The chandeliers had not changed. The furniture had not changed. The people had. Sometimes the most important transformation inside a building could not be photographed because it happened in the standards that everyone agreed to carry forward after the moment itself had passed. The lobby gradually returned to its familiar rhythm, yet it no longer felt like the same place. Guests checked in, luggage rolled across polished marble, and the pianist resumed playing soft melodies that drifted gently beneath the chandeliers, but every person who had witnessed the afternoon carried away something that could not be packed into a suitcase. Marcus accepted the room key that should have been offered the moment he arrived, then paused before walking toward the elevators. He turned once more to face the employees, the guests, and the executives standing together. Buildings do not earn reputations, he said quietly. People do. The words settled into the room with remarkable simplicity because everyone understood they applied far beyond a single hotel. Claire closed the final executive report and smiled. The review is complete. Marcus nodded. The work is not. Culture is built every day, one decision at a time. Emily watched him for a moment before asking the question that had remained in her mind since the beginning. Did you know this would happen when you walked through the doors? Marcus smiled gently. I hoped it would not. Every visit like this is an opportunity for people to surprise me in the best possible way. Today some did. He looked toward Emily, the businessman, the older woman, and the guests who had chosen fairness before they knew his position. Character reveals itself long before titles do. The businessman adjusted his briefcase and laughed softly. I came here expecting a meeting. I am leaving with a lesson. The older woman nodded in agreement. Respect should never depend on recognition. Marcus thanked them both before stepping toward the elevator. As the doors opened, he paused one final time. Never assume that quiet means powerless, he said. Some of the strongest people in the room have no interest in announcing who they are. They simply expect to be treated with the same dignity every human being deserves. The elevator doors closed gently, carrying him upward while the lobby remained still for another few seconds. Claire gathered her team and prepared to continue the broader company review. Emily returned to her workstation with renewed confidence, understanding that honesty had protected not only one guest but the values the hotel claimed to represent. New employees would eventually arrive. Updated training would begin. Policies would be refined. Yet everyone who had stood in that lobby understood that no handbook alone could guarantee respect. That decision belonged to individuals every single day. Outside, the afternoon sun reflected across the glass entrance as travelers continued arriving from every direction, each carrying stories no one else could see. Some looked wealthy. Some did not. Some wore business suits. Others wore simple clothes after long flights or long drives. None of those details explained who they were, what they had accomplished, or what burdens they carried. Marcus had never raised his voice to prove his worth. He had raised the standard instead. And in the end, that standard became the most powerful statement anyone in the lobby would remember, because true leadership is not revealed by the authority someone possesses. It is revealed by the dignity they extend to people before knowing anything about them except that they deserve to be treated with respect.